I'm Patricia Van Skyke, Executive Director of the Lloyd Library and Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program, The Homeopaths, with Dr. John Haller. The Lloyd Library was founded by three brothers, the Lloyd brothers, nearly 150 years ago. The Lloyd brothers manufactured and developed plant-based drugs in keeping with reform medicine theories, which were responding to the excesses of the prevailing medical practices at the time. In the 19th century, three alternative medical practices stood out: the eclectics, which our founders adhered to, the Thomsonians, and one of the oldest and the only school well recognizable today, the homeopaths. Two theories embraced by the homeopaths were like cures like and the law of minimum dose. Tonight, we'll hear more about those, the history of homeopathy, and what critics and adherents have to say about this 200-year-old medical practice, which, by the way, is still practiced by 200 million people worldwide today. Tonight's program is the third program on 19th century medicine presented by Dr. Haller for the Lloyd Library. Dr. Haller is one of the leading scholars of 19th century alternative medicine. He is Emeritus Professor of Medical Humanities and the History of Ideas at Southern Illinois University and has authored more than 30 books on subjects ranging from sexuality, pharmacy, religion, spirituality, and war. Dr. Haller has been a good friend of the Lloyd since first conducting research here in the 1990s. His books are a must-read, and we turn to them often as a reference tool. Please join me in welcoming Dr. John Haller. Hi, John.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. With this being my last lecture, I want to thank Patricia for giving me the opportunity to present the histories of the eclectics, Thomsonians, and now the homeopaths. I've always enjoyed talking about these three movements as they played a great part in my professional career. A word of caution before I begin tonight's lecture. I want you to know that homeopathy is by far the most difficult of the three systems that we have discussed. Even with my 2-volume history of American homeopathy, I am still not sure I understand all of what it claims to be. What this means is that this lecture can only offer a cook's tour that will necessarily be incomplete. Homeopathy had its origins in the late 18th century. As a school of medicine, it competed with a long list of other 18th and early 19th century healing systems. Only 3 of them remain in existence in our present day: chiropractic, osteopathy, and homeopathy. Osteopathy is no longer sectarian in that it merged with regular medicine in the 1960s after relinquishing its theory that included cosmic energy that entered the body through the manipulation of the spine. The other 2 systems continue as separate and freestanding. Chiropractic, like osteopathy, was originally based on drawing cosmic forces into the spine through entry areas known as vortexes. However, it too decided to revise its theory in the 20th century to make it more rationally based. Homeopathy, unlike the other 2, kept most of its theories intact into the present day. Homeopathy originated in Germany, but acquired its popularity in France before migrating to England and then to the United States in the 1820s. By the first half of the 19th century, it had developed into a sophisticated system of healing. In fact, many regular physicians switched over to homeopathy, believing it offered a milder and more effective method of healing. A point to remember is that homeopathy originated prior to the advances in pathological anatomy, Pasteur's work on germ theory, and the introduction of vaccines and antiseptic techniques and anesthesia, as well as the application of diagnostic instruments like the thermometer and stethoscope. These innovations revolutionized medical sciences in the second half of the 19th century. What I hope to show you this evening is a highly sophisticated therapeutic system, half scientific and half spiritualistic, whose popularity among the middle and upper classes gave it high respectability. I'm referring to people like Samuel Morse, Henry Longfellow, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Chester A. Arthur, Edwin Booth, Henry Ward Beecher, Nathaniel Hawthorne, John D. Rockefeller, and Washington Irving. In the United States, homeopathy was originally organized around 69 medical colleges. It was also the therapeutics of choice in 92 public and 52 private hospitals. They also published 39 journals, organized 35 state societies, and accounted for over 9,000 academically educated practitioners in 1900. 15 of its medical schools were still operating in 1908 when Abraham Flexner began his visits to all medical schools in the United States and Canada. 10 were still operating in 1911. Note that the AMA divided the 10 homeopathic schools into 4 categories, thus identifying those most apt to be judged acceptable and those requiring extensive changes. Only 6 remained in 1912, and by 1936, only Hahnemann of Philadelphia was left, but it was required to relinquish its homeopathic status before it could be accepted. Homeopathy is also a popular healing system worldwide. It is found in India, Pakistan, France, Germany, the UK, Brazil, Cuba, Mexico, and Colombia. Estimates suggest that well over 200 million people practice some form of homeopathy. I say some form since each country appears to have slightly different features. Despite its popularity, homeopathy remains a controversial topic. This is because its key components are not consistent with the laws of normative science. Let me repeat that. They are not consistent with the laws of normative science. Homeopathy was founded by the German physician Samuel Christian Friedrich Hahnemann, who lived from 1755 to 1843. He came from a small village near Dresden in the state of Saxony. Well educated and proficient in 8 languages, he pursued the study of medicine in Leipzig. However, he became so distraught over the poor state of medicine that he abandoned the practice altogether. Instead, he decided to make his living translating medical books and writing medical essays. Oftentimes, while translating medical books, he was known to test their own therapeutic techniques on himself. This included drugs. His purpose was to add his own comments to the texts he was translating. And this is what happened in 1789 when he was translating an edition of William Cullen's Popular Materia Medica. At the time, he became fascinated with the virtues of Peruvian bark, which was known to be successful in the treatment of malaria and various forms of intermittent fever. Curious as to how it worked, he decided to experiment with the medicine by taking it himself as a healthy person. To his surprise, he found that the bark produced symptoms of an artificial disease similar to those individuals who were suffering from malaria. This caused him to wonder whether other medicines worked in a similar manner. He also wondered if this might be the answer that doctors had been searching for centuries. He concluded from his experiments that genuine homeopathic drugs are those that create the same symptoms in a healthy person as those who are diagnosed with the same illness. This discovery led him to proclaim what he called the law of similia similibus curantur, or like cures like. This became his first principle, or law of healing. Basing his treatment on this theory, he began a highly successful practice and eventually moved to France at the age of 80. There he gathered around him a number of disciples who spread his ideas abroad. While living in France, Hahnemann also began treating his patients with smaller and smaller doses of drugs. Within a short period of time, he came to the conclusion that the less medicines, the better the results. Given the use of heroic medications popular in the day, it is little wonder that smaller doses resulted in improved conditions. But Hahnemann did not stop with smaller dosage, but moved from small to infinitesimal dosage. He believed that drugs which acted according to the law of similia could be reduced in dosage and still retain their effectiveness. So how did he make these medicines in such low dosage? Think of it this way. He would take a drop of the tincture of belladonna and place it in a quart of water and then shake it. And he would then take a drop of that mixture and put it in another quart and shake it. And then take another drop and place it in yet a third quart and shake it, and so on and so on. As you can imagine, in each instance, the amount of drug in the solution became exponentially smaller. Yet according to Hahnemann, each time this attenuation was performed, the drug's healing powers increased. Now, how, you ask, was this possible? He called this process potentization or dynamization, and this became his second principle or law. So the question is, how does this transformation or dynamization occur? He believed it occurred due to the manner in which the drug was shaken. He explained that during the process of shaking, the drug's particles underwent a radical change from a crude drug to a dynamic immaterial force. In other words, when the fluid was shaken in a specific way, the material elements in the fluid transformed into immaterial dynamized agents, and these were the agents that stimulated the body's recuperative powers. From this point on, homeopathy gets even more complicated. Hahnemann originally prescribed his drugs at the 6th attenuation, but moved gradually to the 30th. Others among his followers were not so conservative and began attenuating their drugs into the hundreds and then into the thousands. Today, these medicines are often attenuated into the millions. However, most homeopaths in Hahnemann's day took their remedies to about the 30th dilution. Even in that degree of attenuation meant that there was only one chance in 100 billion of the liquid containing a single molecule of the original drug. As you can imagine, potentization irrevocably separated Hahnemann's school from conventional medicine. It also entangled it in the movement in endless feuds over its modus operandi. Not surprisingly, the adherents to regular medicine poked fun at these beliefs. In the 1850s, a popular poem was published in numerous papers. It went like this: take a little rum, the less you take the better, and pour it into the lakes, wetter and wetter. Dip a spoonful out, mind you don't get groggy, and pour it into Lake Winnipesaukee. Stir the mixture well, lest it prove inferior, then put half a drop into Lake Superior. Every other day, take a drop in water. You'll be better soon, or at least you ought to. Another example was a popular cartoon depicting similia similibus curantur, or like cures like. I believe the implications are obvious. Now, Hahnemann's third principle was what he called provings. These were carefully prepared repertories or books containing lists of drugs that had been tested on healthy persons. Their symptoms were then collected not just in the hours after the drug was taken, but over days, weeks, and even months following a single dose of the drug. For example, when a healthy person took a single dose of Peruvian bark, it allegedly produced hundreds of different symptoms, including the following: skin sore to the touch, pimples on the shoulder, sneezing, unremembered dreams, trouble concentrating, runny nose, growling in the belly. For Hahnemann, each of these symptoms was to be listed in the repertory, and repertories were prepared for all homeopathic medicines. So once a patient came to a homeopathic doctor with an illness, the patient would recount his or her symptoms. The homeopath would then look through his repertory to find a correlation between the patient's symptoms and that of the particular drug's effect on the healthy person. The result was a specific medicine to treat the patient's symptom complex. There are several other principles of homeopathy which I could talk about, but for our purposes this evening, I want to move on to homeopathic medicines. Homeopathic products come from plants such as red onion, arnica, poison ivy, belladonna, and stinging nettle, minerals such as white arsenic, and animals such as crushed bees. After these medicines were made into solutions and dynamized, they were manufactured into sugar pellets, which the patient placed under his tongue and was allowed to dissolve. Homeopathic medicines also came in other forms, such as ointments, gels, drops, and creams. Many of these homeopathic physicians who dispensed their medicines in the lower doses hoped that someday homeopathy would become a specialization within regular medicine. This, however, never happened because an increasingly large segment of American homeopathy had no interest in forming such a relationship. For these latter homeopaths, they became more interested in discovering the modus operandi behind their highly diluted drugs. Early in this effort, this search developed a most interesting relationship with Emanuel Swedenborg. Now, who, you ask, is Emanuel Swedenborg, and what did he have to do with homeopathy? Well, the answer is nothing, as he lived long before homeopathy. But it was not the case with his followers. Emanuel Swedenborg lived between 1688 and 1772. He was a contemporary of René Descartes. He was also a genius who conversed with engineers, geologists, physicists, metallurgists, philosophers, and statesmen. He also conversed with angels. You see, Swedenborg was a mystic whose interests included communication with spiritual essences or angels in heaven and on other planets. His deep faith in God and visions of the afterlife were popular in 19th century America. His beliefs were also the centerpiece for many utopian communities in the 19th century, including Brook Farm. In fact, Emerson spoke of the first half of the 19th century as the age of Swedenborg. Swedenborg viewed heaven to be organized by degrees in an orderly descent from the divine mind. This meant that after death and after being judged, the souls were organized into communities of like-minded spirits. Following the manner in which they lived on earth, they also lived among those with similar characteristics in heaven. Swedenborg also had particular views on disease. He explained that disease was nothing more than evil and falseness that sapped away an individual's health. Disease started outside the body in the form of inappropriate behavior, including improper thoughts and desires. And if uncorrected for any length of time, this behavior entered the body, causing disease. This was the meaning behind the term, the sick soul. The man most responsible for making the connection between homeopathy and Swedenborg was a man by the name of James Tyler Kent, who lived between 1849 and 1916. It was he who set American homeopathy in a direction totally different from that practiced in other countries. Kent graduated from none other than the Eclectic Medical Institute of Cincinnati in 1871. He, along with several of the EMI faculty, were Swedenborgians and members of the Church of the New Jerusalem. This included John Scudder, the owner of EMI, Benjamin Hill, Eli Jones, and several other faculty members. All attended the Swedenborgian Church on Longworth Street between Race and Elm, only a couple blocks from the school. Given Swedenborg's influence, for a period of time in the late 19th century, EMI's therapeutics became surprisingly similar to homeopathy. But that is another story and an interesting topic for some eager graduate student to undertake. After graduating from EMI, Kent moved to St. Louis, where he practiced eclectic medicine until his wife became ill, and to his surprise, she requested a homeopathic physician to treat her. Impressed with his wife's recovery, Kent decided to take a second medical degree at the Homeopathic Medical College of Missouri. After graduating, he joined the school's faculty. A few years later, he became professor of materia medica at Herring Medical College in Chicago. While there, Kent began prescribing his medicines at the 200th attenuation, and eventually his attenuations expanded into the millions. This explains why Flexner showed so little respect for the Herring School during his 1908 visit. and listed it in the fourth tier, requiring it to completely reorganize before being considered acceptable. Herring chose not to change its therapeutic methods. Kantianism is what we call Kant's particular form of homeopathy. And so what should we understand about Kantianism? What were its essential elements? And where do we find the influence of Swedenborg? Kant viewed the cause of disease as the result of the soul's health, rather than attributing it to germs or other causes. Each soul's structure was reflected in the body's physical profile, meaning its degree of health or illness. While Kant expected his students to learn about the muscles, the nerves, and organs, these had nothing to do with the health of the soul, which gave the body its particular profile. Accordingly, he rejected modern scientific pathological knowledge as a guide to diagnosis. He insisted that bacteria were perfectly harmless in every respect. Similarly, the autopsy room was no place to discover disease causation. Instead, he emphasized the quality of the soul and the power of the mind on the vital forces governing it, and by inference, the body. He viewed patients as spiritual beings whose thoughts constituted the reigning principles of their soul. And when one's thoughts were drawn to inappropriate ends, the individual became sick in the will and from there degenerated to various physical ailments. Between 1880 and 1920, Kant's form of spiritual healing became the mainstay of homeopathic practice in the United States. Not surprisingly, it carried with it the attributes of religion. You cannot divorce medicine from theology, he once wrote. He also wrote that a man who cannot believe in God cannot become a homeopath. Critics accused Kant's therapeutics of being akin to that of a fundamentalist religion. Since Kant's medicines were intended to treat the patient's soul, the job of the homeopath was to match drug personality with the spiritual constitution of the patient. Here was the influence of Swedenborg on his medicine. The higher the patient's suspected spirituality, the higher the attenuation required for cure. Not surprisingly, Kant's approach created a schism within American homeopathy. Those who hoped that homeopathy might become a specialty within regular medicine rejected his therapeutics. These were typically the faculty who taught in its medical schools. For those who fell under Kant's influence, however, they paved the way for a type of homeopathy that ignored physiological and organic medicine, replacing it with a system more attenuated with the subtle vibrations emanating from the cosmos. When Kantism died out in the 1920s, there were growing questions on how homeopathic medicines worked, since they were so highly diluted. During the 1940s and 50s, many homeopaths compared the behavior of atoms, electrons, and protons during atomic fusion as that comparable with what occurred during the shaking process known as dynamization. During the 1960s, thought visualization became popular. In this particular theory, thought created an electromagnetic field of energy that could turn a simple drug into an energy-based medicine. The most creative theory was that of water memory, popular in the 1990s and initiated by a French immunologist, Jacques Benevisti. Benevisti explained that when a particular drug was dynamized in water to the point where there was no longer a molecular structure left in the liquid, the water nevertheless retained a molecular memory of the drug and therefore retained its medicinal powers. Other theories suggest that trace amounts of nanoparticles acted as biological signals, triggering effects on the body. Each of these theories, at one time or another, has sought to explain how its dynamized medicines work. In fact, dynamization has been at the heart of homeopathy's history since its beginning, and it also remains its Achilles heel. Recently, I asked a homeopathic pharmacist I know, Jay Yeager, we have been friends for many years, to provide me with the most recent explanation for potentization. He sent me a link to the Euro Pharmacy for the treatment of body, soul, and spirit, located in East Troy, Wisconsin. Its founder, Mark McGibbon, explains on his website that his company adheres strictly to Hahnemann's instructions on potentization. This meant he did not potentize his medicines during an eclipse, nor during the daylight hours between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., since these were not the ideal times to capture the most effective forces in the universe. This suggests to me that homeopathy continues to seek rapport for the primacy of spirit over matter, its attention to the restoration of harmony in the body's system, and its openness to the acceptance of unseen forces. Today, the education of American homeopaths comes in two forms. One source comes from online courses such as those provided by Dana Yeomans' American Medical College of Homeopathy, or colleges such as the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine, and Bastyr University in Washington State. Each of these colleges offer homeopathy as a specialization. Nevertheless, the academic side of homeopathy is barely discernible in the United States, and in its place is over-the-counter self-prescribing. This form of homeopathy is a robust, multi-billion-dollar business enterprise. Its medicines can be found in countless shelves at your local pharmacy or sold by independent vendors. All of this is to say that modern homeopathy has to a great extent moved from the academy into the world of the non-professional healer. As such, it has distanced itself from licensure requirements tied to training, testing, and certification. This sector of homeopathy has little faith in the use of empirically based science or the importance of the double-blind, controlled clinical trial. This skepticism played an important role in the creation of the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health in 1991. The center, whose main advocate was former Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa, is a government-funded institution. It was established to investigate and evaluate promising unconventional medical practices. With respect to homeopathy, research conducted by the center concluded that its methods have yet to prove persuasive. As a consequence, in recent years, the National Center has refused to fund further homeopathic studies. The center is not alone, as other Western nations have acted similarly. In addition, France, Germany, Sweden, and the United Kingdom no longer include homeopathy in their national health services. Some critics believe that it is time for homeopaths to consider finding a new identity. Could it be in the form of psychotherapy or something comparable to a faith-based system of healing? Perhaps. Some have suggested it falls under the rubric of the placebo effect. But what do we know about the placebo effect? In 1955, Henry Beecher instituted 15 double-blind clinical controlled trials using over 1,000 patients. He discovered that in patients who were given a placebo instead of a specific drug to treat a given illness, upwards of 35% of them found relief. This, some suggest, explains the success of homeopathic medicines. However, homeopaths vehemently reject this explanation and are quick to claim the efficacy of homeopathic drugs on babies and in veterinary practice and even in the treatment of plants. Even if true, I would submit that autosuggestion, which is at the heart of the placebo, has a role to play in all medicines, whether prescribed by regular doctors, by homeopaths, or when self-prescribed. Homeopaths claim its legitimacy derives from over 200 years of appreciative patients who have voted with their feet and their pocketbooks. Saying this, of course, does not explain its modus operandi, nor the fact that its laws do not fit within normative science. Homeopaths, however, argue that their system is no less effective, only different from regular medicine. Simply put, they have given normative science a promissory note that some future discovery will explain its modus operandi. I leave it up to you to decide its efficacy of this most interesting system of therapeutics. I end with a photograph of Hahnemann's statue in Washington, D.C.
Again, John, I'd like to thank you so much for this program and the other two as well. And I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us. You can find upcoming programs on our website, lloydlibrary.org. Programs like these are supported by members of the Lloyd Library and Museum. We invite you to support our programs by visiting our website. And you can find more programs like these, including John's earlier program, on our YouTube channel. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you and have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.